Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I am your host, Guillermo Garcia, always known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And welcome to my second comic interview here on the channel. Now, my guest today is part of a dynamic duo who head up New Creations Comics, a comic book studio dedicated to creating faith-based, culturally diverse stories across a wide range of story genres and art styles. Their first publication were Proverbs and Parables and New Crew. Other graphic novels that followed were Ragged Capes, New Visions, and of course, Street Fury. New Creations Comics' mission is to use the comic book medium to communicate the message of the gospel and present a biblical worldview in their artistic endeavors. Their mission Bible verse is, "Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it." Psalms 127, verse 1. Now, my guest is a retired Los Angeles Unified School District teacher and currently the senior pastor of La Mirada Foursquare Church. He has been involved in self-publishing since 1988, and his partner in crime is a digital troubleshooter, new fodder, and works as a writer, artist, letterer, and editor of New Creations Comics. So let's give a huge round of applause to a first-timer here on the channel, one of the heads of the dynamic team of New Creations Comics, Mr. Ralph Miley. Ralph, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you so much. It is just a pleasure and an honor to be on your show. You're so kind, and you have so many kind words to say about us. I'm humbled to be here.
Awesome, Ralph. Awesome. Now, viewers, if you remember Street Fury, I had the opportunity to go to Anacon a few weekends ago and meet Ralph in person, who told me all about New Creations Comics and their comics. And when I saw Street Fury, I was hooked. Me and Ralph had an amazing discussion of the mission statement of New Creations Comics and what they're trying to do with the comic book medium. So, Ralph, let's dive into that. How did you sort of get involved in the comic book world, and how did New Creations come about?
Well, my first involvement in comic book world, to just give a hint of my age, was in 1964 when my brother introduced me to Fantastic Four number 2425, the Hulk versus Thing by the legendary team Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. And I was hooked from that point on. And I've been enjoying comic books ever since. Then probably around the 80s, I would start going to Comic Con when it was in the Civic Center downtown, and that was just a joy for me. It was a great eye-opening experience. And during that time, I also was I'm a Christian. I'm a person of faith. That's my foundation. And sometimes what you'll see is I had in the 80s, I was having a tough time trying to negotiate my faith with comic books because I loved them both.
Right.
But then I met a friend by the name of Don Ensign, and he was the founder of the Christian Comics Art Society, but he was also a comic book geek. And so we met and we talked, and I discovered, wow, I can love God and I can love comic books, and it's okay. and when we started this fellowship, and we would work on these independent projects. Our first one was Valiant Efforts back in 1989. That was my first venture into small press. I knew nothing about small press. And then when I discovered it, I've been a junkie ever since. In that I enjoy the process, just being creative. And it was so much fun because I so like the superhero genre in which to tell stories. And then a little bit later, we came into contact with a very talented writer by the name of Kevin Yong. And he thought he was the only one as far as a Christian who enjoyed comic books. And then he met us, and we first started this newsletter called New Creation, in which we would go to the comic book conventions and just talk about the Christian impact in those conventions, what we were seeing. And our newsletter was went for about 2 years. Then from there, we did our first publication, which was Proverbs and Parables. That was our first big one. And what we did was we initially set out like a proverb or a parable to make maybe 20 Christian artists. And it started out with that many. But then all of a sudden, people start contacting us and they start recommending other people. And so we start sending out more scriptures to all these different artists. And eventually, we had over 60 artists contribute to that publication. And some of them, are big name people like Gene Yang. He was a contributor to Proverbs and Parables. Sergio Cariello, who did The Lone Ranger, was a contributor to Proverbs and Parables. Legendary inker Gary Martin also contributed to Proverbs and Parables. Then let's see who else. Mike Miller was a contributor to Proverbs and Parables. And so we had all these professionals contributing to 1, 2, 3 pages to this publication, and we put it in a book. And we were able, and we weren't aware of print on demand at that time. Again, that was back in 1999 when we first published Proverbs and Parables, and we went through a print broker, and let's just say we got more than we needed.
Right.
Selling them so many years later, 24 years later, still may have a couple of boxes left. But that was the catalyst for the other comic books that we started doing, such as New Crew. That was Kevin Yong's baby. That was his desire to do a book. And so we collaborated to help him produce his book back in 2000, I believe it was. And then we went on to do other books such as New Visions and Ragged Capes. And then in 2014, Don Ensign passed away. And so that was kind of a blow to us. So there was a lull in our production. And then we started picking it up. We would do a book every couple of years with Ragged Capes and New Visions. Then I'm a retired school teacher. As you said, I was with the LA Unified School District at the same school, Nimitz Middle School in Huntington Park. I was there for about 33 years. And it was a great experience. As far as a public school, Nimitz was exceptional. Great students, great teachers. And that was just so much fun for me. But then I retired, became a pastor. And then the past 5 years, I've been able to do Street Fury, which is something I would have never thought I'd been able to do. The first Street Fury story was published back in 1989, and then another one in 1991. And then we would have sporadic stories featuring the different characters in Ragged Capes over that span of time. But over the past maybe 3 or 4 years, the Lord has allowed me to really focus on just doing the Street Fury story. And I'm telling a different story. I'm not telling the same story that I would have done back in 1989, 1990. I'm over 60.
Right.
I get to do. I'm trying to tell a different story from a different perspective, from a different lens of a person who the Lord has allowed to live this long, allowed me to produce this this story. I would have never thought it would happen, and so that's where we're at now. And Comic-Con, we've done Comic-Con. We've had a table at Comic-Con. At least the Christian Comics Art Society, we've had a table at Comic-Con since like 1997.
Wow.
And it's just been a really great experience. The people at the convention have just been exceptional to us. They were just very kind, and it's been a really good relationship and a really good experience having that opportunity to be there. And to represent as an alternate form of publication,
Yes.
an alternate press, and that has been our journey thus far. So we are actually finished with Street Fury #4, and it should be available in July.
Nice. And honestly, my viewers, if you did not see my review of Street Fury, which, if I'm not mistaken, Ralph, this is a collection of the first issues of all the characters, the introduction, correct? Yeah, I was blown away because it reminded me, and I think this is what we talked about at Anacon, Ralph. It reminded me of the stories of the old school comic shows like the Justice League, Static Shock, Batman, the animated series, the New Adventures of Batman. It was just so powerful, so inspiring, which I think it's a breath of fresh air. It's something where it's familiar because it's a comic book, but it's not like Marvel. It's not like DC. It's not like IDW. It's its own unique flavor, and it's a nice refresher. So, as a little overview, what is the story of Street Fury, and who are the titular characters on the cover?
Well, the story of Street Fury is I I like doing character stories. I mean, in other words, why does the character do what they do? What is their
Mm,
motivation? And it's not always so clean cut. It doesn't always end up in what we would call a happy ending because
right.
their struggles and their journey. And so, what I'm trying to do is give the reader an insight into these individual characters and their particular journey or their particular story arc. And it starts out as individuals. We have, of course, we have Virtue and her origin and how her life wasn't all that great.
Mm,
And that's Kevin Young's character, and he did I think he did an excellent job in that origin issue that appears in that story. Then there's Night Sentry and the Lord's Avenging Angel. And you have these two different approaches to their faith. One is merciful and wants to help, and the other one wants judgment and wants
mm,
the people to suffer for their wrongs, and how they basically are at odds with each other. They're not like villains, but they're coming out of a different perspective. They're looking at
right.
things like uh, the Lord's Avenging Angel is looking at it from a position of hurt, and how does he navigate that? And at their prayer at the end, you have two different ideas of prayer. You have one that is merciful and kind and just, and then the other prayer is one of vengeance and wrath, and
Oof.
balancing those two and seeing that their journey is different, and that people can look at that and see that. I had one person who read the book, and they said, I understand the Lord's avenging angel because I feel the same way too sometimes.
Right.
I just want some justice, and I don't always see it. So
Hmm. Nice. And that's actually is really fascinating. And just like the characters, because if people didn't know, like he looks from like the opposite, he looks like a villain one would expect. But if I would, if it would be correct, he would be sounds almost like an anti-hero in the sense that he is a hero, but his approach to being a hero is a little bit more on the sinister side in his approach, whereas the Avenging Angel, he is, of course, Angel is trying to be merciful and he approaches heroics in that mindset. But that is really cool. And it does offer a different perspective because you're right. A lot of people really find some connection with comic characters. That's why people say, "Oh, I identify with Superman," or "I identify with Batman," "I identify with Wonder Woman," because the traits that the heroes represent, the characteristics, we ourselves as people in the real world have had similar instances. So that is very powerful when we as people can relate with fictional characters. And that comes from, in my opinion, the works of masterful storytellers, masterful creators, people who have honed their craft and really understand what their reader is looking for. So let's actually go back into the past. So when you guys started making your comics, what was the near desire you want to satisfy for your readers and for your followers?
Well, I think when we initially started out, we wanted to make comic books that reflected our faith in a more grounded way, in a way in which comes out of our life, comes out of the life in which we live. And we wanted to have characters that kind of reflected that, not in a sense of something that is over the top, but
Right.
something that is grounded in the decisions that we make. And we wanted characters to reflect that, and characters in which people can connect with. And then as I've gotten older, I look at it as an invitation.
Mm.
Because of my experience as an African American, because of my experience as a Christian, and my experience as a school teacher and as a pastor, uh, what I try to do is make an invitation. Okay, this is my world. This is where I'm coming from. This is my filter. This is my lens. I think we all have filters and lenses, whether it be cultural or spiritual,
Right.
societal. Those are going to be the filters in which we look at things. And so what I'm trying to do is, to the reader, I'm inviting you to look at the life through how I've experienced it, the journey in which I've seen in my lifetime, and hopefully be able to create a character in which the reader can kind of like make that connection with, or they like, I feel that person, or I understand that. And they're looking at it again from me. It's always going to be through, again, as a Christian, it is again as African American, and those are the those are the I think the stories which I gravitate toward, and hopefully the reader can get a little bit of insight into that by reading the characters and say they come away with something that they may not have ever considered, or something
Right.
that may not have thought about, and saying, oh, I never considered that. And that's one of the ways in which we're trying to communicate, our faith is through the character. And I myself, I like superhero teams, Teen Titans, and
Mm-hmm.
that's my favorite ones, and also the X-Men, the
Yeah.
John Byrne, Chris Claremont X-Men, and the George Perez, the Len Wein Teen Titans. I like the interactions. I like how you can see the characters grow and walk through that as they interact as a community, because they're trying to do everything within the context of the community. So they eventually begin to interact, and how that impacts their walk, how that can even change their perspective as they interact with one another.
Wow. Really, really powerful. So, what would you also say is your promise to the readers who pick up either Street Fury or Ragged Capes or any other comic of new creations?
I I guess I would promise them that you're getting insight. Hopefully you will get an insight into a a culture that you may not have considered. Because when you really look at it, like especially like for me as an African American, when we look back, like just culturally in the comic book field, we see spirituality being presented, but not to the like Brother Voodoo, uh, and we see that over the years, but we never see it within the context. Let's just say within a perspective of faith, because you have major in the African American community, you have major denominations, the African Methodist, the Missionary Baptist, the Church of God in Christ. All of these African American institutions have been a part of the experience for decades, and yet we don't see it being explored within comic books. And yet,
Mm,
the
okay.
reality of it, it has had an impact, and that includes any type of faith, whether it be Catholic, Muslim, whatever that might be. Do we see that playing a part in the character development? Now, we sometimes get a cursory idea of what it is. We get a little bit of insight, but do we really get the motivation and how it plays in that character's life?
That's really, really powerful, and that makes sense. I mean, we in like the comics like Marvel, DC, and IW. You're absolutely right. We know that they exist, but we don't really get to really explore that aspect. And it is very fascinating because you do get to see another perspective of them that we don't typically see. And you're absolutely right. And that just makes me wonder now to the next question. When you began printing your comics and your stories, what was the initial feedback like? Was it positive? Was it negative? Was it mixed? And was there one review that has stand with you guys at New Creations? And follow up to that, do you believe that your promise has been validated by these reviews over the years?
I think it's been a mixed review. Some people like us and some people don't, but that's okay. I'm good with that because it's some when you mention certain things, like if you mention areas of faith, sometimes people get offended by that, and I'm kind of too old to be worried about that right now. So, but we get mixed reviews, and if I feel if it's constructive and if it's something that I can look at and say, okay, then maybe that they make a really good point, and then what I would do, hopefully, I would be able to incorporate that perspective into future issues. If they
Right.
it is a you could you explore this a little bit more, or I was left wanting, and but give me some strategies. Share with me what it is. And we've had those. We've had some people who haven't liked it. We have had some people who have really enjoyed it. I have one person who read it who's an English teacher, and they said they really enjoyed the characters. They enjoyed uh, the the insight that they were getting of the characters. And
Right.
when you read it, they would say, "Ooh, this is going to offend some people." And I said, "Yeah, I know." So
Right.
that's all right, and not in a way where I'm attacking a person, but
Right.
what it is part of their character. It is part of who they are,
Mm,
uh, and and how do we, when we look at it, do we see the reason behind it?
mm.
It just because is they're angry just because, or is there a motivation behind it? Like with the character, if you read, like when you read Street Fury #1, the character who lost his wife and his unborn daughter,
Yes.
he to him everything changed, and his whole it was too much for him, and it really tipped him in a direction that is not healthy, and yet he still believes that what he's doing is of God, even though he hasn't come to realization that his pain is that's been his filter, and that is his filter.
Right. And that I believe is, see, this is why I love Street Fury like so much. When I was reading this, I had to read it again because the characters are, they're human. They're organic. They're not your typical archetypes you would see in comic stories that we have been used to over the years. They're very, very different, and it's refreshing to see that. And you're absolutely right. Like there are some things that are tied to characters that people would find, controversial or offensive, but it's not in the way where it's like outright trying to be offensive. It's just tied to who they are as a character, their growth. And it is really fascinating to explore. And I guess you may have already answered this before, but do you feel that your promise over the years has been validated by the reviews you've gotten, the positive, the mix, and the so forth?
I think in certain cases it has. Whenever I talk to a reader and they make that connection with that character, and then they come back and wanting to see what happens and how that character grows, that that gives me actually encouragement to continue on telling the story. When you have
Right.
people who may not even have a religious foundation make a connection with the character, knowing that the
Right.
character does have a religious foundation, and they're wanting to see. I feel that if you can make a character engaging, you can
Mm,
make you can make that character somebody when they read it, they become invested in that character. Then they're going to go and follow that character's journey, and if that journey takes them through their walk of faith, because the reader has been invested in the character, they're willing to go on that journey with them.
right. And that's like really, really true. Like, especially like with authors, well, the character is the most important tool. The character is the vehicle that takes the reader to these different worlds through the story, and you get to experience it through the eyes of either the main character or a group of characters, such in the case of Street Fury and so forth. And I too agree that I love character driven stories as well as characters with different perspectives who live in the same area, but their views of that area are vastly different, and it provides a lot of diverse storytelling. Which then I think leads into probably one of a few important questions or serious questions I have always like to ask. So I'm sure you definitely agree, Ralph, that as a creator and as a storyteller, to create something that you love takes a long time. Hours and hours working with the team, the artists, the panelists, the writers, everything, trying to make sure everything's the way you guys like it. Years and years of revision, already hours and hours of revision, then putting it out on the digital stage now, in an age where
Yeah.
technology allows for mass consumption of information. And there's always that voice in the back of the head, imposter syndrome, what I think affects everyone in any industry. Was like, oh, why are you creating this? No one's going to like this. What are you doing putting this out here in this medium? And so I'm wondering, Ralph, for you, have you and the others at New Creation Comics have this or have encountered this sense of imposter syndrome? And if not, what has disciplined you and the others to continue telling stories because you know that this is where you guys belong, that you guys are authors, you guys are creators, you guys are storytellers because this is what you love?
I think one of the things in storytelling that's real for me is then the collaboration, because in that collaboration you do get that encouragement. You
Mm,
want to help each other to fulfill that creative desire, which I think, as creators we have. And there is nothing there is we have this there is a satisfaction in seeing your product, like in your hand. There is this, I can't explain it. Just to be able to, like, for me to be able to hold, a issue of Street Fury and to look at it and to read it, and to look at the characters, it is there is that fulfillment in that.
hmm
And God has allowed me to tell that story through the comic book medium, which I love. And it has allowed, Kevin to tell his stories, and his new cruise is just it is a fascinating story. And his character Virtue is a wonderful character as you read in the first issue, and to explore that and to see that character come to life and see the various takes on that character, and then collaborating with people. One of the things in which I belong to is called Alpha Omega. It's a bi-monthly zine. It's like a fanzine, and
Right.
we've been printing it bi-monthly I think 1985. For about This will be our 40th year. So
Wow.
we're actually up to issue number 236.
Holy mackerel.
And we've been blessed to be, and it's like, the best way to explain it is like a paper blog through the snail mail. Even though we have a digital imprint of it making available to our membership, what that has allowed, at least for me, to get some creative input. So what I would do is in this bi-monthly publication, I would send the membership the thumbnails and the scripts, and they would look it over and they would offer their criticism to it. And some of it, I said, "Oh, thank you for sharing that with me because I didn't know." And so I would include that toward the final, the final product. And then, of course, you have proofreaders and other people who you trust. Kevin Young is one of them, and another friend of mine, Eric Jansen, who does God and Country graphics. Those are the two friends that I have that have really, I don't think I would have been able to do the story without their encouragement and without their input and their insight to help with it. And that's what, for me, it brings a certain amount, for me, gratitude to
Right.
be able to see that, because like I said, the first one was published in 1989, and it wasn't until 2000, 22, 21, that I actually got to see it in print. And I'm going, wow. And just to see how it's grown. And I think for me, it's just, you want to tell a story. That's part of what we want to do as creators,
Mm.
is to tell a story, and tell a story that means something to us. Tell a
Right.
story that we have some knowledge of, and some experience in, because I think it makes it that more real. If I started doing a story about Muslims, which I know nothing about, it wouldn't be authentic, and it wouldn't
Hmm.
be, I don't think it would have the same impact because I don't know enough about the faith. But
Right.
with Christianity, I know about that. And so hopefully when I do the characters, that sense of authenticity will be reflected in the characters, in that they're not picketing or anything like that. What is happening is their spiritual journey, their spiritual growth. And hopefully the reader will be able to see that. And that's part of the motivation, to be able to be creative and to be able to share that and to be able to and
Yes.
get excited about it and to talk with people about it, just how I'm talking to you. It
Hmm.
is such a, for me, a wonderful experience because I am such a geek.
I 100% agree with everything you said. That creativity, the ability to connect with others who share the same passion, who motivate you to continue it, it is really powerful. And again, what you said about creating something that's authentic to you, and people see that, that's the same with authors, as I had a lot of authors on this podcast who talk about when creating a story that they're passionate about, they want it to be authentic, they want it to be real. I've had a lot of others who have mentioned that they have had friends who told them you should join this latest trend or this thing. And some authors do, some authors don't. And the others who don't say, if I try to write for that trend or that click that's happening in the publishing world, my readers are going to know that's not my best work. That's not my authentic me. I'm just trying
Exactly.
to join the train. And even if you do finish that story, there's no guarantee that trend is still going to be there by the time you finish it. It's going to be gone. You would have to think of the next train, the next click. And ultimately, that goes back to, which I'm sure you definitely will agree, Ralph, is if you have to decide, are you creating the story for a reader in mind, or are you creating the story for you? I've had a lot of authors who said that they create the story for themselves because this is a story that they wish that they had growing up, and that's what they love to write, and of course reflects over to their readers, which now turns over to the business side of the interview, which I'm very excited to hear your thoughts on. So, Ralph, when you started in this business, in this industry, did you initially, with you and your team creating these characters, did you initially want to go the route of the self-publishing at that time, or did you want to try your hand at the traditional market, Marvel, DC, IDW, and try to submit your characters, your guys' characters, to them?
Uh, Initially, when I was really young, back in high school and college, I wanted to do the Marvel and DC route. In reading some of their books, like I said, Teen Titans and X-Men, well, I wanted to do comic books like them.
Hmm.
But as I got older and as I became more seasoned and I began to connect with other believers who had a passion for their faith, but also a passion for comic books, self-publishing became the vehicle in which this journey has taken me on,
Mm.
because I know a lot of people who are in the industry who have done stories for Marvel and have done stories for DC, and more often than not, or even collaborated with larger companies. And more often than not, what happens is what they see on the screen, or what they see translated by the company, is not what they wanted to do.
Right.
Uh, it's not how they envisioned their character. And some of them come away with it kind of embittered by it.
Mm.
It wasn't the story that they wanted to tell. Now, sometimes they are able to tell that story, but sometimes they're not. And because of that, um, that they tend to focus in on the independent publishing. And for those who want to tell that story, it doesn't all that might be the way to go. I was at this one convention just this year. It was called Black Comics Day, and there was somebody from down in San Diego, and it's a great event. It's a 2-day event, and I was there, and I had the Street Fury, the New Creation books, and uh, still there. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, you're good, Ralph. You're good.
Somebody from Hollywood. They say, "Hey, do you think your stories would, have a mainstream connection?" And I had to be upfront with them and say, "No, because of my faith, because of what I believe, it's not going to appeal to the mainstream, and because of some of the topics in which I address, they're not going to be popular. So I couldn't, in good conscience, market it in that capacity. I had to
Right.
be front with them, saying, no, this is the story in which I want to tell, and it's not for everybody."
Mm-hmm. 100%. And I absolutely agree when it comes to creating your own stories. All of us, but especially myself, when I began my journey as an author, I want to go the traditional publishing route because that was what everyone said that was the thing to do. But as I've grown into writing my stories and my future stories, I realized that I wanted to tell the stories that I wanted to and had some ownership and control over. And I
Yes.
went publishing world. Now, as I've told many times on this show, you can go either way, and whichever one you choose, that is great. But you definitely have to know the benefits and the consequences. The benefits of traditional publishing, yes, you do get a larger audience and a larger market. But the other side of the coin, it's a business. They have to make money off of your work. And if your work is not going to make them money, they're going to axe your project.
Yeah.
Self-publishing, you do have more control, but you have to understand you're going to have to finance the entire thing, which includes the editor, the cover artist,
Yes.
marketing, which I think is probably the biggest thing, which I'm still learning how to market, and just trying to plan when to release it, because that's a thing that not a lot of people really take consideration is when do you market your book? Do you market it in the spring? Do you market it in the summer? Do you market it in the winter or summer? So all those have to be taken into consideration. And more so or not, it's also the mentality. One guest on my show made a very good connection with authors have two brains, the creator brain and the business brain. The creator brain sole purpose is to make the project. When that project is done, the creator brain goes down, and that's when you have the business brain, because that's when it comes to marketing, finances, trying to figure out, okay, where am I going to self-publish my book that's going to have the largest audience? Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, and what platform, ebook, print, hardcover, etc. All of the things have to be taken into consideration. But also, most importantly, is the audience. Do you understand your audience that you're writing for? I know we talked, I mentioned briefly that creators want to write the stories that they want, but they also have to be mindful of the readership that they're trying to market for. So, Ralph, for you guys at New Creations, Do you guys think it is important, or maybe let me rephrase it? What is your comment on the notion that creators really have to understand the audience that they're writing for, be it a large audience or a small audience, and how important is it to really understand that side of the business?
If you're looking at some to have a wider impact on a larger market, then it is incumbent upon you to be aware of your target audience. That is imperative, because if you're going to market it toward that, you need to know who you're aiming at. Like, for example, from being a Christian, I know that the Christian market, they like Bible stories. They like the historical Moses and Jesus and the Old Testament, New Testament. They like comic books based on those that part of their faith. And when you're going to go after that, you have to understand that. And so those stories are going to have the most impact, those who follow the historical biblical narrative. However,
Mhm.
for and you have to be aware of that. So, and you have successful books like the Action Bible, and
Yes.
uh, that's immensely successful because they're going after their audience. David C. Cook is a master at it. They've been doing it for decades because they know their audience. For those who just have a desire to tell their story and to share that, then their audience may be a little bit smaller
Mm.
than what they might want to think about, because you have to consider that if you're wanting to have a greater impact. Like for me, my audience is kind of like, okay, then here it is. All right, African American, okay, it's getting a little bit smaller. All right, conservative Christian, getting a little bit smaller. Superhero, oh, there it is. The audience is that, and that's just the reality of it. But I'm
Mhm.
aware of that because I'm just more into telling the stories I want to tell. But those are people who want to reach that wider audience, or look at who are you aiming at. If you were doing a zombie one, a zombie story, is that you're aiming it at that audience. So you're not, if you're going, the best way to maybe market your story is to maybe go to those conventions like Monster Palooza,
Right.
where they have that, where you're going to reach that audience, as opposed to another audience. For example, there's in Southern California, you have so many different cons, but
Yeah.
they're each aiming at a specific audience. I like, there is the Latino Comic Expo.
Mm.
There is the Alpha Omega Con, which is a Christian oriented con. There is the Q Con, which is the LGBTQ convention. There is again the Black Comics Expo, uh,
Right.
and that's their audience, and that's what they're aiming at. So, like at the Latino Comic Expo, that's their audience. At the Black Comics Expo, that's their audience. At the Alpha Omega Con, the Christian audience is their audience. At the QCon, that's their audience. And they're writing stories aimed at that audience. And what it is, all right, then, this is the stories that we're writing. Now I'm opening the door for you to maybe come in and participate in the stories that I am writing.
Definitely 100%. Like the audience is very, very important. And sometimes your audience could be completely different from your target audience. One guest, well, the two guests I had on the show, my first ever double interview, were the authors behind Nuclear Power. Desiree Proctor and Erica Harrell of Fanbase Press. And when talking to them on this topic, they said that their audience was mainly geared towards, those that enjoyed science fiction, sci-fi, mutants, because it dealt with nuclear radiation in a post-apocalyptic 1962, alternate 1962, I might say. But to their surprise, the audience that they got were actually children who grew up during that period during the Cuban Missile Crisis and at the height of the Cold War, because they grew up with it. They knew the dangers and what the Cuban Missile Crisis would lead to, the implications. So that is very, very important to understand your audience, but also don't be surprised if your target audience is going to be vastly different. You may be surprised, and that's okay, because you are able to get an audience that you are not expecting. And that is probably the most incredible thing. And now, when it comes to crafting the story as authors, and I'm sure you may also have comments on this too, Ralph, if you want to get into, let's say, the fantasy genre, the science fiction, fantasy, or I said fantasy, but dystopian, whatever, a lot of guests on my show have said it's always best to read stories in that genre to get an idea in a sense of, okay, why do people like this genre? What are the common things in this genre? And so I'm wondering, Ralph, for you, when you guys were creating the characters of Ragged Capes, Street Fury, and so forth, what were the comic artists or even books that really helped you guys hone in your types of storytelling, how you approach characters, differing narratives, and world building?
Oh, one of the story, my friend Kevin Yong, he introduced me to this anime series, Evangelion Genesis.
Oh, yes.
Oh my goodness! And for me, I saw the series. I said, "Wow, how nihilistic! Oh my goodness, this is wonderful!" And so I said, "Wow, if they can tell stories like that with giant robots, I can tell stories like that with people in spandex." So,
Yeah.
but that was a catalyst. And then there was another story in what was called the Green Lantern Corps, which was a collection of short stories. And I liked the concept of doing short stories. I said, wow, to be able to do a short story and tell something that is powerful and engaging within the maybe 8 to 12 pages that you have, that again was for me a catalyst to kind of like, okay, then how can I tell that story in a short amount of time that
Mm-hmm.
just to get that person involved? And so it was the Green Lantern Corps, my Teen Titans and X-Men, and I like the Teen Titan animated series. Oh, that was a fun series for me.
Yes, it was.
The Evangelion Genesis story, I have to go series. I say, oh, all of those were just sovereignly came placed into me, and I said, oh, I can connect with that. Oh, that's something I want to explore, and it may be different for other people. Some
Right.
people might want to do the grand opus that 800 900 pages. That's fine, and then if that's what they want to do, then they need to focus in on that and then persevere to it. Where you have people that are creating novels, and that is what they're passionate about. But for me, I like superheroes, and Kevin, we like superheroes, and so that is our focus. That was the genre in which we were drawn to, and incorporating our faith into that made it even more satisfying.
Wow. And honestly, I've heard of Evangelion. I had a lot of friends watch the show. I never got around watching it, but I've heard great things about it. And you're absolutely correct. It's different for everybody, but the things that we grew up with, the things that we read, really have an impact on how we approach storytelling. Like myself, for those who have read or have known my book, The Gathering, I like telling stories with a group of 7 characters or a team. And I love to have characters from different periods, no matter what kind of story it is. All my stories have like either a duo, a trio, a group of 7, a team. And I love telling stories like that. I love seeing the team dynamics, the differing stories of these characters, because you will have readers who will identify with different characters to say, like, I know people say on the internet, and it kind of relates to being an author and being a comic writer is you have the main character that you focus on, and you have the side characters. And sometimes the readers will enjoy the side characters who like steal the shows, and that is perfectly fine. You have characters who love the main characters. At the end, we as creators, we want to create stories that are engaging and that connect with the reader, and just they take them on a journey. So then, with that in mind, Ralph, would you say that you guys have a better idea of your readership now compared to when you guys got started in the beginning?
I think we have a better idea of the stories we want to tell. When I
Okay.
that was became more clear. Kevin Young, again, my partner in the New Creation line, he's said to me, "Man, the stories I want to tell now are totally different than the stories I wanted to tell 10 years ago."
Mm-hmm.
And so we, not so much the audience, but we got more of an epiphany as to how to improve or how to craft the stories that we feel that the Lord has put on our heart and
Right.
that we've been allowed to do. And so that is what's happened over the years. Not so much the audience for me, I can only speak for myself,
Right.
more of how to improve the craft, how to improve the story,
Mm-hmm.
how to make it more engaging and relatable.
100%. And that is very true. I think when it comes to the business, being comic writers, authors in general, is honing the craft of the story. Because your story that you had initially to when you finally print it, it's not going to be the same story. It's going to be
Yeah.
vastly different. And that is okay. It's just your growth as an author. And that I think also ties into another important question, which has a lot of discussion. I'm very excited to talk about this. Is okay, so I'm going to give context for this before I ask you the question, Ralph. So, on my show a year ago, I had a guest known as Natalie Wright. She is the author of Season of the Dragon. And I met her at the LA Festival of Books last year. Amazing woman, an amazing guest. And when we talked, she expressed to me that Season of the Dragon was her seventh book, not her first. And she dropped a pearl of wisdom that I believe every creator, no matter if it's artist, comic writing, author, short story, poet, whatever, this is really important to take to heart, which is there is no guarantee that your debut anything is going to be the start of your legacy. And I've met exceptions to that. I've met an author named Andy Peliquin who was able to create a story, a series that launched him to award-winning status and allowed him to live off of the success to create 3 new series. But on the off chance for creators and myself, I'm still working with this, is that we have a rise, we fall, we rise, and then we fall again. And then we're not hitting our target audience, which then goes back to imposter syndrome, which then leads back into important things, which is what were your long-term goals? Did you want to be a creator just to create, or did you want to be a creator that want to make money? Or in other words, did you want to be an author, or did you want to be known as an author? Because those are 2 very different mindsets with 2 very different goals. And for you, Ralph, in your opinion, what are your thoughts on that? Where it is like there's no guarantee that your debut anything is going to be the start of your legacy, but it should not deter you from telling stories if being a storyteller, a writer, an author is what you are passionate about.
I agree with that. In other words, if among the many comic book creators that I've known over the years, there have been some who had, the aspirations of, launching the next Marvel or launching the next DC. And
Right.
that's what they wanted to do, or create the new Wolverine, or or
Mhm.
Dead, those type of characters, which are just have lasted decades, and they go in there with that desire, and it doesn't automatically happen.
Right.
And because of that, they become discouraged.
Mhm.
Uh, and I can't tell you how many startup companies who have ventured in, like for example, the realm of comic books, and have given up on it because it wasn't what they expected. It didn't bring in the money or the notoriety that they had hoped for. Uh, and for me, I would think that as a creator, the desire should be, to create, that, like you said, to be an author instead of be known as an author, be an author. And when
Right.
you have that, then I think that will help you persevere through those difficult times.
Mhm.
Because if you're going with the ambition to be known as an author, and that notoriety doesn't come in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, then you might give up on it. But if your desire is to be an author, then you're going to do that in spite of the trends or the popularity, because that's what you're called to do. Because as an author, you're wanting to tell that story, and it's not dictated by what is popular. Because, like you mentioned before, trends change,
Yes.
people change. And if you're looking at it become known, then the society is fluid and can vacillate in any given direction.
Yep.
But if you stay focused on the stories you want to tell as an author, then you will continue to tell those stories regardless. Like, I look at the superhero genre. Back in the 60s and 70s, yes, it was popular, but never to the degree it was in the 2000s. Never.
Right.
And if it tanks, then we're still going to be doing superhero stories because that's what we like to do.
Right. And especially now more than ever, the superhero genre has just exploded, I
Yeah.
should say, because it's like the newest thing. Like everything is superheroes. Everyone wants to try to copy it, but you can borrow inspiration from it, but you shouldn't try to copy people who have been working in those titans for years, who have honed their craft. Focus on you, because as one person said, grit trumps talent. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
if you already are a natural skilled writer or you can draw the perfect characters. Doesn't matter. If you can't go through the hurdles, the trials and tribulations, the fires and the flames, people who have been in the industry, who have worked long and hard to establish their place, then you may want to reconsider. And if you do go through those trials, you'll meet people along the way. You'll meet people who will encourage you, who will support you, who will be your connection, your web. And that is honestly, I think, another great thing about being self-published is you can meet new people that can help you grow and of course give you encouragement, which comes to the last two questions of the interview. Rob, before I get to the final question, looking back at your life right now, with all the stories that you've worked on with your team, with all the people you've met, the different companies that you've worked with or have collaborated with, who have been your biggest supporters, and have you gotten a sense of validation from your fellow peers?
Well, the community in which I'm a part of, the Christian Comics Art Society, that has been an invaluable source of encouragement and camaraderie. That is where you can brainstorm. There's nothing better than a great brainstorming session. those,
Nice.
those are so much fun. And in that, when you collaborate, at least for me, that is we're social beings. Like you said, the stories you like to tell, you like 2 and 3 and up to 7 characters, because I think we experience some of our greatest growth within the context of community,
Mm-hmm.
because we're social beings. We
Yep.
do interact, with families or neighborhoods or friends, or even within the community of, like I said, comic books, and for me specifically, Christian comic books. There is that community, and when you connect with that community, that becomes that sometimes they are your lifeline in this journey in which you're going on. For me, sometimes there have been difficult seasons in my life, and because of the community in which I belong to, I have people praying for me, and lifting me up before the Lord in their prayers. And for me, that has been such an encouragement, to know that there are people who are doing that. For me, it's a greater encouragement than I would have, people buying my book, knowing that there are people praying for me and bringing me before the Lord. And especially during the difficult seasons, when you are in those dark times, or in those valley circumstances, to have those
Mm-hmm.
people there to help you and to uphold you, and to just have that fellowship. And that makes such a big difference in that journey that we're on.
100%. Absolutely agree with you, Ralph. And now we come to the final question of this very fun and engaging and insightful interview. With everything that you've learned in the industry, trials and tribulations, people you've met, the work you guys have created together, what is your word of wisdom to those that want to go into the self-published comic industry?
I would say, first of all, uh, be sure that you persevere. That is going to be the key, because, like you said, may be very talented, but if you believe in the project in which you're doing, then you're going to persevere in doing that. But don't persevere to the point to where it costs your family.
Right.
uh, I don't think anything is that important
Hmm.
where it would where you would sacrifice your family, because for me, family is like that. That's your main, that is your priority.
Right.
But make sure you get a balanced perspective of the vision in which you have,
Hmm.
one that allows the person to be consistent in their application of the strategies in which they're implementing to make that vision happen, not make it happen, but making sure they're doing what is necessary, making it available, so that when maybe that door does open, that you're already ready. So I think perseverance is key. Another I think is important is collaboration, brainstorming, and
Hmm.
getting part of that community. I can't stress that enough, as far as if you're going into the self-publishing. Now, there may be times in which you do become successful and you are able to make money at it, and that's a great thing. And thank God that you had that door open to you. But for those of you where it may have taken a little bit longer, then if you really believe in your project, then you're going to stick with it. And you're going to take some advice from those who've been around. In other words, those who have been on that journey before, so that not to take over your vision, but to give you some insight and some strategies as to how to be successful into seeing that vision come to pass.
Absolutely. And that is just, perfect words, Ralph. Perfect words. And now we arrive at the end of this amazing comics interview. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest, Mr. Ralph Miley, for coming on to the show. Ralph, thank you so much for being here. And where can people find and engage with New Creations Comics, as well as purchase an issue of Street Fury and others that you guys have created?
Well, we have a website, newcreationcomics.com. So just Google New Creation Comics and you'll find us. on the internet. But also we have an Instagram page, which is Street Fury New Crew, and you'll see the different shows we've been at. We are at, oh goodness, we've already been at 5 shows this year. So much fun, and we met at Anacon, and we have
Yes.
some shows coming up in the near future, like Comic Con and the Alpha Omega Con. You can find us on that. We have a website, another website. What is it? What is it? Keep Up Christian Comics Art Society. That is a website if you're looking for people of faith to collaborate with. We have a website there. We have a annual convention called the Alpha Omega Con, which is September 7th. And you Google Alpha Omega Con on the internet and you'll come across it. And we've been doing this, will be our 9th year doing it. And it's just a Christian themed, family friendly comic book convention. It's just so much fun because you're around a whole bunch of geeks. And it is, for me, it's been just, that too has been a part of the journey, which has been so encouraging, because then you connect with other believers and other creatives and you see what they're doing. And sometimes that's all you need as a catalyst to get you going, to ignite the fire, which you have to even produce your own project.
Nice. I will link all those down below in the description of this video, as well as check out my full review of Street Fury here on the channel. I will link it as a video for you to watch right over here. Hopefully I'm pointing to the right box. It always changes. And thank you all for joining us for this amazing interview. Again, a huge thank you to Mr. Ralph Miley of New Creations Comics. And I wish him and his team and his crew the very best going forward this year. And who knows, maybe we'll see each other again for another interview for another comic that I get the chance to read. Until next time, viewers, this has been The Wandering Scribe and The Wandering Quill signing out. Make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below what was your favorite part of the interview, as well as what was your favorite part of my review of Street Fury. Until next time, this has been The Wandering Scribe and The Wandering Quill signing out. And until next time, have a wonderful day.